welcome to the very first ever episode of Slimehouse TV. Make some noise! This dude's selling me this one for 30 quid. TV here at HorrorCon UK 2018 with the lovely Barbara Crampton.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the Retro Ghetto.
I'm Colonel Custard, codename Mad Doe.
Hello, and welcome to the Craftsman Show. My name is your host, the Craftsman.
How dope is this thing, man? This is the Tiny TV by Tiny Circuits, and I first saw a version of this like 3 years ago or something like that over on the channel of Craftsman Steady Crafting, and obviously straight away I wanted one, not only because it's like a cute little retrofitted TV and I love stuff like that, but also because it's the perfect size to scale with the action figures that I make and I collect on this channel. So I am going to talk a little bit more about this telly later on in the video, but while I'm on the subject of the Craftsman, that's a name that you're going to hear me mention many times in today's episode. So the Craftsman from Steady Crafting is not only one of my favourite YouTube creators on the platform, he's like one of my favourite creatives of all time. This guy might look like a cute little fluffy puppet, but you get him in a workshop and he's an absolute beast. And what he's done recently in like the last couple of years in the realms of toy making and then more recently in the realms of Sofubi is like borderline genius. So he sent me some stuff to take a look at in today's episode. I've also got some other things that I want to get out and show you, and then I'm also going to be checking out a formula and a method that, if it works, is going to take my toy making to a level that I never really thought were possible, not at home anyway. So if that sounds like a bit of you, then as always, sit back, make sure you're comfy, and get yourself strapped in for a brand new episode of Slimehouse TV. Let's do what we do. So speaking a little bit more about Craftsman and some of the stuff that he sent me recently, all things that are going to play a big part in today's episode for one reason or another. The first thing that I want to show you is something that I'm absolutely honoured to own. This is Otto 7, Craftsman's first ever professional factory-made Sofubi piece. So this is a collaboration with Vinyl Wonder, another guy who's really well known in the world of Sofubi. And if you've been watching the Steady Crafting YouTube channel for like the past 6 months, the past year or something like that, you'll know that Craftsman's been on a real Sofubi journey, collecting it himself, but then also networking with people that create Sofubi. He's then not only been making his own Sofubi in factories, but then doing DIY stuff as well. Like, he's been doing it all. He's like fully thrown himself into the world of Sofubi, and it's been absolutely awesome to watch. When one of your favourite YouTubers, like arguably my favourite YouTuber, starts covering one of my favourite ways of making toys, that's like a real cool thing to me. So to now own one of his first ever factory-made Sofubi pieces, a collaboration with an awesome guy, is something that, yeah, brings me a lot of joy. Now, I have covered Sofubi many times on this channel. Craftsman's done an awesome video talking all about its process and that kind of thing, so I'll link that down below so that you can check it out if you want to find out more about how Sofubi is made. But it's basically an old Japanese process that can only be performed in certain parts of the world, because over here in the Western world, like America and England and that kind of thing, a lot of the chemicals that are used to make it aren't even legal in our countries. So it's a very traditional, finite, specific process that they do. And even something like this that looks relatively simple is still a 1, 2, 3, 4 part mold. Each one of those pieces has to be moulded in a very specific way. It's a real risk to make your own Sofubi. It's a lot of money to invest if it doesn't work out. But I'm so happy that Craftsman like took that leap with Vinyl Wonder and he's made this, because it's such an awesome figure. And I think this is also now my third piece of Craftsman's work that is now in my collection, and it's always such an honour to add a new piece to it. So yeah, shouts to Craftsman first of all for sending me this thing, and congratulations on his first ever factory produced piece. It's an incredible toy, it's an incredible achievement, and it's going to take pride of place in my collection. Something that Craftsman also does that is super impressive is makes his own DIY Sofubi. Now, I have talked about this a little bit on the channel before. I showcased one of his pieces that he sent me, but he's basically developed a way that bypasses the factory and enables him to make Sofubi at home. Now, this is not just a simple process or anything like that. I understand that this is very complex and it takes someone with a brain like Craftsman's to be able to work it all out, but just the fact that he can now create his own Sofubi at home is super impressive to me and very, very inspiring. So that Otto 7 Sofubi, as I just said, is a factory-made toy. And that's when you send all of the details, all of the STL files, all of like the 3D files and stuff to a factory, and they handle all of the manufacturing. Earlier this year, myself and my friend Vega Relics from Italy, we made a Turgo Sofubi, and it was done in this exact same way. And when you have something made by a factory, that's the closest it's ever going to feel to something that you would walk in a shop and buy off the shelf. It's like a pure factory-made professional toy. It doesn't get any more authentic feeling than that. And if you've watched any of my toy making videos, you'll know sometimes we do the SOFUBI stuff, sometimes we do the resin toys, but more time I do 3D printed like one-off prototype figures. That's my speciality. Well, that's at least what I've been really focusing on for like this past year, making really nice one-off pieces for my own collection, just to test myself and get better. And whenever I'm doing them, quite often I talk about the articulation and like how I've progressed with the articulation, what kind of articulation I'm doing. And even though I have created a little articulation system that works, it doesn't really translate well to 3D printed resin. Now, I do fully understand toy articulation through and through. I've been a toy collector most of my life, and I'm confident that I've probably come across pretty much every single type of articulation that you could possibly play with. But I'm always pretty limited when it comes to 3D printed resin, because fundamentally 3D printed resin is always kind of brittle. Now, ELEGOO do send me some really nice ABS resin, which is more flexible than normal resin, but it does have its limitations. If you've got like a ball and socket joint like this, you've got a socket and then a ball going into it, and then you've got like an arm peg, and that's turning like that. Over time, it will sand away at itself until it's like that and it's loose, and then it's no longer like a nice sturdy holding peg joint. And that's pretty much always been the way that it is when you're using 3D printed resin. But then recently, when I did my Space Marine video, I kind of hinted to the fact that I've found maybe a new kind of resin that you can put in your 3D printer that acts very different to the normal ABS, more rigid kind of stuff that I'm used to using. And one that I've heard nothing but good things about. Basically a resin that's specifically made for action figures, all made by a company that, again, I've only just recently found out about, called Resione. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to start talking about toy articulation for a whole episode. I'm not going to start trying to print a load of different types of toy articulation out or anything like that. I understand that's a very specific subject, even in this really niche, like, little genre of videos that I make here on YouTube. But speaking about the Resione resin, I basically, long story short, hit them up. I told them what I'm doing, what I want to do, showed them some of my videos and stuff like that, and they were very receptive, and they said that they wanted to send me out some Resione to try. And they not only sent me one bottle, they actually sent me 4 bottles of different types of Resione resin, different variations. So first of all, obviously, it goes without saying, massive shouts to Resione for their generosity. Big thank you for sending these out to me. This is really bougie high-end stuff. It's not entry-level resin or anything like that. There's one bottle in here that comes with a $70+ price tag, but you get what you pay for. This is the real deal. Now, I'm not going to get into all these different types of resins in this video or anything like that. I'll save them all for separate episodes, but there's one specific type in here that will hopefully counter all the problems that I just spoke about, and hopefully also open up a whole new world of toy making on this channel and allow me to create stuff that's way cooler than just a little bit of improved toy articulation. Like, that's nice if it can do it, but when I saw what this has the potential to do, I was absolutely blown away. So the one that I decided to try first of all from this batch was the black flexible F69. Out of all of the resins that Resione had sent me, although they all looked awesome, I knew that this one was going to be something very special. Just looking at the pictures that they'd got on the website of how versatile it is, like whether you want to make figures, remote control car tyres, or even jelly shoes, this resin's got you covered. Now obviously I was very eager to use it, but the instructions on the website made it very clear that this is not a beginner resin. It can be pretty temperamental if you don't dial in all the settings perfect and use their recommended supports. So first of all, I had to make sure that I got all that stuff set in stone, because like I said, this resin is bougie, so I didn't want to be wasting any of it. I also chose to use my small ELEGOO Mars printer for this. 1, because if anything went wrong, it was a much smaller vat to clean out, and 2, this little thing is an absolute workhorse. It very rarely fails on me. I never really have any issues with this printer like I sometimes get with the bigger Saturn machine, so I was confident that if it was going to work, then this would be the printer to test it on. It's also very cold in England at the minute. It's freezing, so the temperatures in my studio are a lot lower than they normally would be. Because of this, I soaked the bottle of resin in some warm water first, and I also keep my vat where I pour the liquid warm with this heated belt that my friend Darren gave me, just to make sure that the temperature didn't drop too low, because that's something else that can make prints fail. So with everything now much warmer, everything sorted, everything seemingly good to go, I filled the printer with the black F69 and set the print going with a good couple of hours before I'd be able to find out if it all worked or not. So while I'm waiting for that to do what it does, I thought I'd let you know what I hope to achieve by printing this, what I hope comes off that printing plate, and how that will improve the toys that I not only make for myself, but also the stuff that I put out for sale to you lot as well. So this here is a little minifigure that I sculpted. This has been 3D printed in ELEGOO ABS resin, and ABS resin is awesome. I use it for lots of stuff, but because it doesn't really have any flex to it, it definitely does have its limitations. Now this one here has been made in a completely different type of resin called PX90, which is a two-part resin that you mix together. You can put any colour in it, and when it dries it feels like hard rubber. This feels like a monster in my pocket or a KESHI, and in terms of homemade toys, trying to make something that feels factory produced and legit, it doesn't get any better than this. This to me is the benchmark. Now even though this is awesome, there's a long process that goes into making a little figure like this. I did a couple of videos a couple of months ago where I had all my casting equipment out and I was pouring silicone and making molds. I then did some filming after it which I didn't even put into a video, where I made two-part molds out of clay, and there's just so much work and time that goes into creating a figure like this. It must have taken me like 3 days to get to a point where I had 2 molds just to find out that the mold didn't work, and then you've got to go all the way back and start again. And although this is a really nice way of making figures and I will continue to do it, it's not the way that you want to make them every single time. When you're trying to make something simple like an articulation peg or just a little one solid colour minifigure, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of work involved to get to something that in many ways often doesn't even come out that perfect. To me, being a perfectionist, like, that's not really the way I like to make toys. Like in here, I've got many different attempts at making little minifigures. I've got lots of ones that went wrong, I've got lots of ones that came out alright, I've still got some to clean up. I tried lots of different types of colours and different mixes, and like I said, lots of them did come out okay, but there's plenty in here that were an absolute disaster. But I am going to keep doing this, I am going to keep making toys in this way. I love that you can have complete control over the colours and do marbling effects and that kind of thing, and when I do my next Turgo style toy, this is the way that I'll do it. But sometimes you just want to make something small, you want to make something simple, and you don't want to go through the whole enigma of doing a whole resin pour and a whole silicone casting moulding and all this stuff. You just don't want to do it. Like, sometimes you just want a simple life. Now basically this little rubber figure is made from the exact same PX90 resin that Rainbow Yarn used to make Turgo, and this had an articulation system that was designed by my friend Darren that's pretty good. We have improved it since then, but they pop in really nice, they stay where they need to stay, and that's because it's made from this resin that doesn't grind away at itself and sand away at itself like I spoke about earlier. So if I can create some little articulation pieces that I can fit into figures after that are all made in flexible resin, then that will hopefully give me the same kind of articulation peg whether I'm doing 3D printed figures or figures that are completely printed in that flexible resin. And I've also seen people already doing it, so I know it works. Providing I can get it to work, then like I said, what I'm going to be able to do with this is crazy. So I decided to leave it a couple of days before I came back with an update, and the reason for this is that first attempt was pretty much a total failure. Only one of the things that I tried to print came out okay, the other was a misprint, and the rest of them had completely snapped off and fell down into the bath of wet resin. Now none of this was due to the resin not being any good, or the settings being wrong, or it being too cold or whatever. It was literally just because I didn't have thick enough supports on my models. And the website did warn me that I needed to use fatter supports than I maybe normally would, but because I was printing something so small, I wasn't sure that it would really matter, so I went with medium supports, but it turns out they had to be the thickest ones that I had available. So I went back and made some adjustments, and after a few more attempts I managed to work out exactly what I needed to do and how to set the models up, and ended up with several successful, very impressive examples of what this flexible rubber-like Resi 1 was capable of. Okay, so it is the moment of truth. It's finally time for me to not only show you what I've been working on, but also to test just how flexible is this Resi 1 black flexible resin. So the first thing that I've got to show you that I printed is something very simple first of all. Just another version of that little Ron the Space Knight inspired minifigure that I showed you in the previous scene. And as you know, I've printed that now in hard ABS. I've also cast it in flexible PX90 resin. And then as of now, I've now printed it in the black Resi 1 Flexi resin. And honestly, this is maybe a little bit more dense, but pretty much as flexible as that PX90 resin. Super impressive. I also printed a couple of my little Guyver inspired figures that you will have seen me try to cast on this channel before. And again, his hands are nice and flexible. The little horn on the top of their heads, that's flexible. And this is just like a technology that I never thought we would see anytime soon in 3D resin printing, but Resi 1 have done prove me wrong. This is insane. I also printed some mini versions of my Space Marine inspired figures that you will have seen me doing bits with on the channel at the minute, been doing lots with them. So I printed out a couple of little ones, all solid. These don't come apart or anything like the big ones do. A little bit bigger than a KESHI figure, but look at that flex. That is insane. Look! They do have a little bit of weird texture on them, like some strange lining, but that's because I can't print these like that. I have to print them slightly at a different angle because of the teeth on the chainsaw. They won't print otherwise. The chainsaw has these teeth, and if I angle it any other way but that, they won't print. So that's why they've got a slightly weird texture on them, but that means that I can like shrink the level sizes and do them on the bigger printer that's 8K. 12K, I mean, sorry, on the big Saturn, 12K, and it means that I'll be able to get these in slightly better definition. But yeah, very, very impressive, and also kind of play with the idea if in the late 80s and the early 90s there was a Space Marine TV series, there was a Space Marine action figure line, there would also be like little monster in my pocket size KESHI kind of figures that you would get from a gumball machine that would be all one solid colour like that, and they would be a little bit squishy. How cool would that be? And my favourite thing that I've printed on here is something that again harks all the way back to what I was talking about at the start of this video when I was telling you all about how awesome the Craftsman is. So the Craftsman has had some really cool muscle figure inspired little KESHI figures sculpted by a couple of his Patreons, and he wanted to see what they would look like in flexible resin. Maybe down the line he's going to try and get them injection moulded or something like that, but wanted to test how they would like fare in this flexible resin. So he sent me the STL. I had the pleasure of printing them for the first time ever. These are like exclusives, and look how cool these came out. And if we just forget for a minute how authentic and how legit they both look, like if these were in a bag of Muscle Man figures and you found them, you would have never batted an eyelid that they weren't actually officially part of the set. If we're talking just about the material that they're made from, honestly, I don't think you could ask for a more authentic feeling muscle figure material. I really don't think you could. You could cast them, like I said before, with the PX90. That's a little bit too squishy though. In terms of like a Kaneko Man figure and a Muscle Man figure, I think this is actually bang on. And even just looking at the little marks that's on the back of them that are left by the supports after, which I've not even cleaned up yet, they're barely visible. If you were trying to do these as a two-part mould, you would have to add little cocktail sticks all over it for air vents and stuff. So you would get marks anyway, plus a seam line, and with this you don't get any of that. So I think it's safe to say, first of all, if we're talking about minifigures and small figures and KESHI and Kaneko Man and that kind of thing, then Resi 1 is the one. So what I've got here is a real mix of random one solid colour minifigures. I've got some old Dragon Ball Z figures in here, I've got some Kaneko Man, some Muscle Man figures, Monster in my pocket, I've got a lot of stuff that I've made myself, and then I've also got some newer like Super 7 muscle figures as well. A real variation, and the perfect mix in my opinion to put these new little 3D printed minifigures up against. So straight away, if I look at one of the Craftsman minifigures, one of these little muscle figures, these little Kaneko Man style figures, if I put that next to an actual old school muscle figure slash Kaneko Man, they're pretty much bang on the same. As I said, I've got some of the new Super 7 KESHI figures as well in there, and these are a little bit more flexible, a little bit more like an old school Monster in my pocket figure, but again, putting them side to side, there's not that much difference, not enough difference for it to be an issue or a problem or anything like that. So if I'm trying to make any kind of figure that replicates this, then this is pretty much bang on. Another really interesting thing about this resin as well is that even though the one I've got's black, they also do a translucent one, they do a white one, which means you could add pigments to it and recreate these kind of colours with this resin in the 3D printer. Now obviously you are limited, you're not able to do marble stuff like I did when I did the 2-part PX90 resin, you're not able to do glow in the dark stuff or anything like that currently, but that doesn't mean that it's always going to be like that. Currently we can do one solid colour minifigures, and to be fair, so many of these old school figures are one solid colour minifigures, the old ones, the new retro ones. It's very much an old school look, and if I'm putting any of these new 3D printed figures to the test against these old ones, these legit ones, then I think it's safe to say that they've passed with flying colours. Also, a very quick shout out, linked to the last episode that I dropped. You might remember Ancient Mariner sent me a little Alfred Hitchcock KESHI, an old Japanese KESHI of Alfred Hitchcock, and when I was looking through the little booklet inside, there were so many other cool ones. So he actually sent me a few more up, so I've now got to add to that collection of this ever-growing collection of KESHI, and this is not even a fraction, I just grabbed these really quick for this video. I've now got Norman Bates, the Mummy, and then the one that I really wanted, the head from The Thing. How awesome is that? Now, although I've talked a lot about minifigures and KESHI and articulation in this episode, this is not even really the thing that I've got in mind that I want to make with this stuff. Like, these are really nice, I will make these, I am going to do like a whole run of these, no doubt, now I know that it works, but this is not what I wanted to get this resin for. This is a nice little byproduct of it. The thing that I actually want to use this resin for, as I've been hinting through this entire video, is so much bigger than this. Let me tell you what I've got in mind. Now, at the start of this video, I was talking about Craftsman and his homemade DIY SOFUBI, and how if you can bypass a factory and the costs and the risks and all that stuff that's involved, and you can make your own SOFUBI at home, then you've kind of got your leg up on the world, or at least the toy world. And as somebody who's been involved in factory-made SOFUBI before, like, I'm fully aware of all the risks that are involved, and if there's a way around that, then I'm always down for hearing about it. So it's something that I'm often looking into. Now, recently I was having a conversation with my friend Jeremy from Tokyo Toy Banzai, and he showed me something that literally blew my mind. He showed me a guy out in Japan creating, using a flexible resin, his own DIY SOFUBI. This resin, to be exact, some really, really beautiful pieces, all created by a guy called Shin Maru. Now, I don't know this man or anything like that, I've had no conversation with him, I just follow him on Instagram, but I saw his work and I was super inspired. And this is also not me like putting out his secrets or anything like that, because he lists all these on his Instagram and over on his Twitter and stuff. Like, he puts up his fails, he puts up his successful pieces, he puts up his whole process, and me as somebody who's a toy maker and a fan of SOFUBI and DIY SOFUBI and stuff, like, I couldn't get enough of it. Now, this is a guy that's made many, many different pieces. He's done lots of trial and error. He really knows what he's doing. His stuff's super impressive, and for me, this is just early days. Like, this is legit just my first ever test of doing it. But while I printed these as well, I also printed a lens cap for my friend because he needed a lens cap, and I said I'd have a go at printing it in. And this came out so nice, and now seeing it in like more of an engineering form and seeing, okay, it can pick up detail, it's got flex, but then it can also do like nice big solid shapes and stuff, aka like the parts that you use for articulation and things. I'm fully confident that I can make my own SOFUBI with this stuff. Like, it's going to take some work, it's not going to be an easy ride, but I'm fully confident that I can do it. So much so that over the last few nights, I've even sculpted an idea for a kaiju that I could use as my first one. Now, there's lots of kinks to work out, I've got to decide how it's going to be hollowed, how the articulation will work and all that kind of thing, but if it's going to print like this, then I'm confident that I can do it, and I can't wait to share the process with you. So big shouts to Tokyo Toy Banzai for putting me onto this guy. Big shouts to Shin Maru. I don't know you, but I think what you're doing is amazing. You're out in Japan living my dream, doing absolute magic. So thank you so much for the inspiration, because you've really, really like lit a firework underneath me to want to give this a go. So that's my plan. I want to keep experimenting with the little minifigures and doing them in different colorways and that kind of thing. I also want to try and make some kind of articulation and experiment with that. And of course, I want to make something that somewhat resembles SOFUBI or ResFubi or whatever you want to call it. But this is also not just something that I want to make for myself. I want to eventually make this stuff available to the community. So I'd love to know from you guys that watch this channel, are you a SOFUBI collector? Is this something that you would be happy to add to your collection, or are you strictly Japanese SOFUBI? I'd love to know. They also sent me all those other resins as well. This is just the first one that I've looked at, so there's a whole world of opportunity of things that I can get into and different methods that I can try moving forward. So if you've got any other cool ideas that you think I could use these resins for, then please let me know down in the comments below, because I'd love to hear them. Bringing this episode all the way back to the start as well, I showed you that little Tiny Circuits TV, and that's something that would probably be better showcased in like a diorama video or something like that, but I just received it and I was super excited to show it you, so I ended up showing it first of all in this SOFUBI video, but that thing is truly awesome. Now, as I mentioned, this is made by a company called Tiny Circuits, and they were kind enough to send me one of these, and it does come in a few different colours, but I went for the clear one because I'm a big fan of like old school translucent technology, and it also looks really cool when you're shining coloured lights through it, which I obviously do a lot of in this studio. And you can put anything on this thing. I've even put my entire movie on it, so I can now watch the entirety of my film Unit 11 on this tiny little Tiny Circuits TV and have it in amongst my action figures, which I just think is awesome. Something else they also sent me as well is this thing, the Thumby. So this is, to my knowledge, the smallest handheld games console available in the world. Now, I first saw this on the YouTube channel of my friend Carrie Lola, who is an absolute genius. If you're into like old school game restorations and coding and that kind of thing, then she's got you covered. She'll go online on Vinted and stuff and buy a bunch of Sega Mega Drives or Sega Genesis or whatever you want to call them wherever you are in the world that are all broken and manages to get them all working. You know, sometimes you think like, if it's the apocalypse, if it's the end of the world, who do I want on my team? I 100% want Carrie Lola on mine, because she'll be able to like rig up computer systems and fix radios and all that kind of handy stuff, and also make sure that we've got an endless supply of retro games to play. And she's so good at what she does that she even helped me code Doom onto this thing. So I can now play one of my favourite games of all time on what is probably the smallest handheld games console on the planet as well, which to me is just like Christmas come early. So I'll also link her channel down below as well, because like I said, she's an absolute genius, she's a great presenter, she's really cool at explaining what she's doing, and I'm a big fan of it. I think she's fantastic. So if that sounds like a bit of you, I'll also link her channel down in this video's description as well, so you can go and check out her channel. So I think that about does it for today's episode. We've covered a lot. We've looked at minifigures, toy making, sofubi, tiny TVs, tiny Thumby machines, all that stuff. And I think I've waffled quite a lot in this video. So if this is your first time checking out the channel, please go back and binge some of the other videos, because they're a lot more entertaining than this one, I think anyway. But I do hope that you've had a good time today, and if you want to help support what I do here at the channel, then I do have a Patreon. All that money goes back directly into the channel and helps me continue to make what I'm doing here bigger and better than ever. I also put some of my exclusive action figure STLs on there now, so you can download them and paint up the figures like I do. We also have an exclusive Discord that you'll get access to, so lots of cool things if you join the Slime Alliance Patreon, and it's growing more and more every day. So I'm going to wrap it up there for today. If there's anything that I talked about in today's episode that you want to discuss, please put it down in the comments below. And I just want to say, as always, a massive thank you to everybody that's taken the time out to watch my video today. It really does mean a lot with all the other stuff that you can be watching on YouTube, that you come back here every single week and watch me do my toy making and talk about toys and all that kind of thing. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to catch you in the next one. But until then, I'm Theo Kane, this is Slimehouse TV, and I'm gone.
All right.